Okay, we apologize, but we have over 25 people streaming in now, so I think we're good to go. Thanks to everybody for coming for this candidate meet and greet. As you know, we have 5 candidates this year for the 3 open board positions. Hopefully most of you have seen their videos, but tonight the purpose of this meeting is for them to get up, stand in front of the audience, such as you and the people who are streaming, and then reintroduce themselves when they have a chance. We're also going to take questions from the audience, and we're also, through streaming, they either send an email with a question or we have a chat box set up so they can send questions in. So you can ask a question to either one of the individual candidates when the time comes, or you can ask one for each one of the candidates to answer. So we'll open that up after they're done. We drew numbers, and so luckily, Mr. Figgenbaum is going to be the first one to speak. So I'll turn it over to Vic.
Good afternoon, everyone. Over the past couple of weeks, I have discussed in detail my background and my viewpoints in both my position paper and my video. To summarize, I was born, raised my family in West Hartford, Connecticut with my lovely wife, Judy. I was a commercial attorney handling both litigation and transactional matters with a national clientele. I counseled half a dozen boards of directors and also served on a couple of boards and was also president of a board. We have been members of Long Cove for 8.5 years and have lived here for 5 years. After serving on our cleanup crew after Hurricane Matthew in 2016, I assisted with helping Long Cove to receive the maximum amount of funds from our insurance carrier. I have served on our long-range planning committee for the past 3 years and have been heavily involved with the creation and the structure of our strategic plan going forward for the next 5 years. I have concentrated my focus on the pros and cons of creating a community and fitness center for Long Cove, having visited almost every private community within a 50-mile radius and having had discussions with all 100 of the top residential golf communities in the country per Golf Week magazine. I've also discussed what an important vital blueprint the Long Cove vision and mission statement is. When all of us bought into Long Cove, we joined a club with a very clear and definitive vision and mission statement, and we all invested into that statement along with our properties. It is a vision and mission statement that does not allow Long Cove to wither and die on the vine through inactivity, but to move ever forward to build and grow stronger over time while adhering to sound financial and management principles. I have also talked to you about the attributes that are sewn into the fabric of every outstanding board member: passion, vision and leadership, stewardship, knowledge, diligence, and collegiality. What I have not previously discussed, I have saved for last because it is so important yet so basic: the definition of a board member's fiduciary duty. What does that mean? It's very simple. A fiduciary duty is our legal obligation of trust to act in the best interest of another party, in this case, the Long Cove community. That legal obligation is statutorily mandated by the South Carolina legislature and repeatedly enforced by case law through the South Carolina courts. In other words, a board member is obligated to act solely in the interest of our community as a whole. To further amplify, a board member, as part of their fiduciary duty, has a duty of care and a duty of loyalty. A duty to care means that you carefully gather your facts and opinions and do not distort the truth or knowingly create misinformation. The duty of loyalty requires that board members act fairly, in good faith, in the interest of and for the benefit of the community as a whole, rather than make decisions based on any personal interest. This is the sum and substance of being a board member. It should be easy to plug in all the attributes and obligations that are required of a board member, but it's really not. In order to do the job properly at the highest level possible, a board member must possess both those tangible and intangible qualities that complete the picture. My long legal career advising boards and serving on boards, including a 2-year tenure as a president of a board, has, I believe, given me the wisdom and sixth sense necessary to help steer Long Cove on an even keel toward the horizon into the future through both calm seas and rough waters. The bottom line, I stand ready, through your support, to serve the Long Cove community and always look out for your interest. I appreciate your votes and I thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Peggy Iannoli. I hope that you've all had an opportunity to look at my resume and position paper and to look at the videos that we did, which I have to say was a daunting job. Most of us are used to speaking in public and not so much being televised on a camera, and I found it very challenging. But I hope you watched it, and I hope that you got a little flavor for my experience and my goals as being a part of the Long Cove Club Board. I worked for public school districts as a school business administrator for over 25 years and worked for municipal governing boards for that period of time. They were very similar to the Long Cove Club Board, 9 members, a president, capital facility plans. A lot of what we see in our financials here were almost the same as what I worked with every day. What I want to express today is how much I think my experience can contribute to the Long Cove Club Board. I know how to work with 9 people who have different ideas. I know how to carry forward the decision made by the board to the community without naming names and saying, well, this person didn't vote for it. I think it's important that we all keep on the same page and we all work together. I also am a team player. I'll work hard. I don't mind being assigned any task. I will do whatever I can to help our community move forward. Ron and I have lived here for over 5 years and we love it. Yesterday we kayaked, we golf, we don't play tennis, but we enjoy swimming, and we enjoy all the activities that we've been able to do here, and some that are on hold right now due to COVID. I'd like to be a part of helping bring the club back to the wonderful, bustling place it was before we were sidelined by this virus. And one of the things I think is an important move that the board has done is the flu shot clinic that's coming up. And I hope that when a vaccine is available for COVID, we can do the same thing here. And as soon as things are better and things are cleared up, I really want to be a part of helping us get back to the memories we were able to make and the fun time that we had. And the final thing that I'd like to leave with you is I've looked at the other videos and I've read the position papers. We have a fine group of people running for the board. The one thing I want you to remember about me is that I am the most qualified woman. Thank you.
Wow. Good afternoon, everyone. I have to text my wife to see if she hasn't voted. I want to vote for Vic. That was very, very well put. As you can see, I don't have any papers. I'll talk not in a format of any kind of context, but just randomly. That's just kind of the way I am. My wife and I have been here for just about 3 years now. We were originally born and raised in Connecticut. Hopefully you guys have and gals have all got a chance to read my position paper and kind of where I'm from, a little bit about my business. I've been in a small family business for my whole life. I'm coming up on 40 years in that business, one up in Connecticut, and then most recently down here the last 6 or 7 years. So I have a little bit of experience in that small business. The other thing that I think that I bring to the table is a wide variety of golf experience. I've been able to be very fortunate and blessed to play competitive golf for probably the last 25 years. They canceled us out a little bit this year, the USGA, to try some senior stuff, but hopefully we'll get back at it next year. And what that's allowed me to do is, I've been a part of private clubs my whole life with my parents and then myself, so I understand how they work and how they run. I'm not aging anyone up here, but the only reason I haven't served on a lot of boards is they told me I wasn't old enough. So I guess now I qualify for being old enough to candidate for this board. So what I do have is a lot of experience playing golf, being involved in local communities, being involved in local clubs, seeing how they work. I've certainly, as well as not had a lot of seats on boards, I've been involved in the intricate goings-on of a lot of different clubs. A couple of different professional golf searches for good new golf pros, involved in running a lot of tournaments and working with clubhouses and so on and so forth. So I think it's important that we have someone that has a real keen knowledge of how golf works. I think going way back, partly due to what our vision statement states, our club was built based on a pristine golf course and a famous golf course, obviously. So I want to make sure that we keep that integrity there as far as golf goes. And our environment with the amenities, one of the things that brought my wife and I here was the extremely good value that we have here at Long Cove. I paid, $6,000 or $7,000 all year long to play golf for 5 or 6 months a year up in Connecticut. So when I came down here and saw the due structure, including tennis, including pickleball, including a boat launch, a boat with a dock, including the golf year round, I mean, I really thought we had a bargain. I know there's some people out there that say different and think differently, but compared to a lot of other local communities, as well as where most of us come from up north, this is a pretty darn good deal. And I really want to make sure that, as a board member, if I'm able to sit on that seat, that I preserve that good value that we have, which means that we take what we've already have here and really make it as good as we possibly can. And then we start to plan for the future. I also think that I will hold a seat as the future of the club. As clubs, age and retirement happens, people start to age out and start to move on and go different directions. And then new people come on in. I've seen that happen with my dad's club down in Florida, down in Naples, where we've always had a second residence. He was one of those ones just last year after 35 years that kind of aged out and said it's time for the new people to come in, in their 50s and their 60s and come in and start to run it for 10, 15, or 20 years. So I want to make sure that we preserve that, and we're looking forward to making sure that people like me, just regular normal folk coming down here, whether they're still working or half working, half not with a family, that they want to make sure that they have something that's a really good value and that preserves a really nice family atmosphere. It's been very special for my wife and I to experience something that we looked in literally a couple of different states to find, and that's a golf club that could actually take our family on, as a member, obviously, but we can allow our kids to come to the range. And although they don't know quite yet, who they get taught by, that's Coach Pro, they have that ability to let them come here. My son takes his scooter with his golf club is on the back and zooms over to to the shop. That's something my wife and I both, grew up in and we were searching for. And we were just very lucky that we found it here. And so we want to make sure that we keep that safe and secure environment as well here. So that's about all, and turn it over to the next gentleman.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fred Delgadio. I'm honored to be here today. Jeff, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm only 39 years old. First, I want to thank the existing board and the management team for all the extra effort they've put in this year to keep us safe. A lot of extra meetings. I've been to some of them. They've spent a lot of time working through this crazy year. Second, I want to thank the nominating committee for giving me the opportunity to run for the Long Cove board. And as you've heard so far, and I'm sure you'll hear from Randy, any of the candidates would be a good choice. This is a good group. It's a tough group to compete against. I think we should maybe expand the board to 11 people. Hopefully you've read my paper, my position paper, and my video. I've been on many boards and homeowners associations over the years, including 9 years at Nassau Country Club up in New York. I was president up there for 3 years. 8 years across the street at the townhomes at South Shore in Palmetto Dunes, Leamington. 4 years at a place called the Residence Club in Deer Valley, which is another homeowners association in Park City, Utah. And I've held just about every position you can hold along the way in those 20 plus years of experience on boards and homeowners associations. I've been a director, I've been secretary, I've been treasurer, I've been vice president, and as I mentioned, president for 3 years at Nassau Country Club. I've also served on more committees than I care to mention. If you look at the position paper, there were probably 10 listed there. There might be another 5 or 10 that I have forgotten about over the years. As a board member, and based upon my experiences both on club boards and business, I'll always try to think strategically while overseeing daily operations To me, that means choosing durability over short-term gain, functionality over convenience, long-term value over immediate value, trends over popularity, and thinking next year over thinking this week. We're all here to answer any questions you might have. I respectfully ask for your vote so that I can use my experience on behalf of the Long Cove membership. Thank you for coming today, and thank you for listening over the internet.
Being last is sort of daunting, isn't it? And the people in this room who've come out during COVID to listen to us talk, I'm going to wager have read most of the materials and looked at the videos. And I just want to try and figure out how to say something else about this community. I was here for 15 years as an off-campus member. I was still working. I was traveling all over, and I'd spend as much time down there as I could playing golf and being on the beach. And I got a taste of what it would be like to be here by playing golf with this extraordinary collection of people I met. And then going up into the bar and having a drink and watching how important $10 was, which was kind of shocking, actually. Really? I mean, you all had this experience, right? And I listened to them and I thought, what an extraordinary collection of people this is. It really is. The people at this club won the game of life. They all went to college somewhere, and you were real smart. And you were in all kinds of professions, just as I was, and you got to the top of the heap and moved here. And that's what makes this community so entertaining and so vibrant, and at times so challenging. You know, the confidence people here have is born of the success they had in life, and they think this is the right thing to do, and other people think this is the right thing to do. And sometimes, and there's board members and past board members in this room that remember this, where two people wanted something that were in conflict and they had to make a decision. And it's a difficult job to be on the board, but I relish the opportunity. I'm more alive in the last month working through this process, doing something that seems so important to my community. I spent this morning with a former board member, and I feel an obligation to all the people that served before to do the best I can to help the community. As part of my preparations to run for the board, I keyed in, or had one of my staff in Cincinnati key in the name, address, phone number, and all the detailed information of every single member. 562 lines. And I went through that, looking at it, and was not surprised to see that I didn't know much more than 100. And I don't know all of them really well. The goal of the board has got to be to figure out what the vast majority of our members want to reach decisions that are the best for the community. Not necessarily the best for me personally. I'd like easy pin locations whenever possible, okay? And I'd like the white tees moved up somewhere, or different items, but it's not about any one of us. It's about how all of us collectively live together in peace and neighborly. When I first got here, I thought it'd be a good idea to run over to the Bikram yoga studio I used to go to when I was younger and fitter and work out one morning. 85 degree, I think it was a 95 degree heat in there for an hour and a half. And after that, I thought I'd play a round of golf. And then when I went home that night, I began twitching. And Tina had to call the ambulance to get me to the hospital. And she followed me. She came down with our next door neighbor. We'd only been here about 8 months. And by then we had 20 or 30 emails or text messages from people saying, what happened? Is he okay? That's the community I want to live in. I want to live in this neighborhood. I'll do the best I can on the board to apply my background and professional skills as a market researcher and as a businessman to bring data to bear on issues, and I look forward to the opportunity to serve if you decide that I should. Thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. We appreciate all that. Now we're going to open up to questions. Anybody have a question? We have some writing questions already, but we'll give you guys the opportunity first. Please give us your name, and because with the mask, it's hard for everybody to tell who it is. Wait a minute. We have a mic coming. Just 1 second. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much for running for the board. It's taken a lot of time to get this far, and your commitment after you get on the board will be much more than that. So thanks for the commitment. Question about the capital budget. Last year, the membership voted down the request to increase the capital plan. And I'd like to hear from any one of you about what you thought contributed to the failure to pass that, and what do you think needs to happen differently for us to be able to get the resources for the capital plan?
Peggy, we'll start with you.
Me? Me?
Yes, ma'am.
I felt that the plan was not approved because of a lot of misinformation about what was in the capital plan, what the money was going to be used for. And I think that as much as the board tries to educate people, perhaps we needed to do a little bit more work on letting people know why we needed to increase the capital budget. Now that I'm a board candidate, we've had some interesting financial discussions and learned what's in that capital budget, and our surplus is getting dangerously low. And we don't have enough money in the plan right now to do everything that we should do. So I think going forward, we need to talk about it a little more, perhaps communicate to the membership a little differently, and help people understand just how important it is to maintain what you have and make sure that moving forward we don't have any big disasters because we haven't properly maintained our equipment.
Does any of the other candidates want to, we don't have to go through the whole thing. Does anybody else have something else to add?
I think Peggy's right. I mean, I think that I heard people express concerns that capital request was to build new amenities. And in the town hall I participated in with Randy last year, he spent an hour going through exactly what the capital was to be used for, and it was to maintain the equipment we had. There's a depreciation schedule for all the equipment, and the mowers are going to wear out, and the stove's going to wear out, and people, an expert group came in and said, here's how much you need just to take care of what you got. But there were an awful lot of people, I think, who thought it was for a health club or other amenities that it really wasn't. And so I think there was confusion. And I think that the board has acknowledged that.
Anybody else want to comment? Other questions? Other questions?
Good evening, Ed Howe. I know Jeff probably the least of all of you, and I know and understand most of you up there running for the board. So the question is directed to Jeff. Are you in favor of increasing our dues annually? We've had very few dues increases over the years, and you've belonged to many clubs, and I just, with your experience, I'm anxious to hear your thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, I would say a blanket answer is no, I'm not in favor of increasing the dues unless they have to be increased. I would be, one of the things I think that is needed at all clubs, and this one included, is financial transparency, to have everybody understand exactly what's going on. As Peg talked about just a minute ago, I think there was a lot of misinformation last year around that. And that's why we've got to pay attention. We've got to think about the capital expenditures as they go forward. Otherwise, we're going to be in huge trouble, and we'll have to, relate to borrowing. So no, I would not say just blanketly I'm in favor of increasing the dues whatsoever. We have a tremendously good value here. If the value means that the dues have to be increased for the reasons that we talked about, maintaining what we have or making some things better, that's okay. But other than a very, very minor increase, I think we have enough people here. I think we have enough revenue here to be able to manage and maintain some excellent facilities. So one of my goals, as Peg mentioned, we just got involved and introduced some of the financials just a couple weeks ago, which I really didn't know too much about. And so kind of was eye-opening in some areas and understood a lot of other areas. But no, I'm in favor of keeping the value the absolute best that we can be. That's how we're going to compete with our other clubs. That's how we're going to compete on the island, is to keep our value at an extremely high level. And that comes from a due structure, comes from the real estate values, and comes from the actual golf and amenities that we've built here. Thank you.
Crazy. Any other questions? Or other questions, I should say, any other questions? Well, I have a couple, or three here, and so this is for kind of follow them up on what was said a minute ago. In 2019, the Finance Committee unanimously approved a capital budget and unanimously approved an operating budget. The Board of Directors unanimously approved both budget requests, and they were recommended to the property owners for approval. The capital budget was not approved by the membership, and the operating budget was approved by only a slim margin. Evidently, there was a disconnect between the membership. How should we determine what the membership wants and is willing to support before we potentially have the same situation develop with the next year's budget? And I'll open that up to everybody. And I think, Jeff, you're first here.
First again.
Yep.
Right back on. Okay. Again, I think the fancy word is transparency. I was a little surprised when I saw the operating budget get approved and the future, basically the capital budget, get not approved. For me, the capital budget is a very, very important thing to be able to maintain the facilities and the club that we have today. So for me, that was opposite of what I thought was going to happen. We know we have a capital budget. We know we have an operating budget. We've got to be real cognizant of what those two mean. We've got to be transparent in how we develop a strategy to announce to the membership what those two mean. If we don't properly take care of what we have today and look to the future, we're going to be in, again, I said it already, we're going to be in some trouble. So we've got to be able to relate that to the membership, exactly what that's for. And believe it or not, a lot of it, which I learned in the financial meeting, a lot of it is maintaining the equipment, maintaining the grounds that we have, not so much buying or building anything new. And so it's very, very important. I just think we have to do a better job. I've been here maybe on my third year now. I like to think that I was one that wanted to understand some of it, and it was still a little difficult to understand all of it. So yes, we can all go to the board meetings, we can all listen to the board meetings, that stuff is a lot, but for a lot of people here, we're not able to do all that stuff. So we've got to develop a communication level where people truly understand what those two budgets are and why we need to approve and pass them as they come forward.
Yeah, having had to increase dues up at the club at New York and also in some of the homeowners associations, it's really the last thing you want to do. Having said that, I looked at the financials before we even moved in here. I looked at the financials and a number of other things. I think we are in great shape financially relative to a number of other clubs that I have information for. Why did operations budget pass and capital not pass? I think it's been said. I think there was some misinformation. I think the capital request could have been more clearly communicated. I think when the misinformation started to be spread around, it was countered. In my opinion, it wasn't countered strongly enough. I would have come out and said, here's the detail of what's in the capital budget. Here's why we absolutely need it. It's to maintain our existing amenities. It has nothing to do with a golf training center or a health club or whatever else the misinformation was being spread around. And that went around to a lot of members. There was a strongly worded email that from the board that came out towards the end of the decision process, but I think by that point, most of the folks had made up their mind on the capital budget, in my opinion, incorrectly by not passing it.
I was fortunate enough to buy some property here in 2000, a lot out on the golf course, and it nearly doubled in 4 or 5 years. And I look around this room and I see some people who owned property here then, and we all lived during that time. It was wild. I paid well, I paid $250,000 for a lot that was going up at 10 or 15% a year. And when the dues bill came, I thought, well, I don't really care because I made so much money on my property last year that the dues going up a little bit is not a big loss. In the last 10 years, and I don't mean to beat my horn, but there was, at the time last year, there was a lot of people talking about the fact that our property values had gone to hell and that, you know, a bundled community doesn't work and so on and so forth. And that's why I did the real estate work I did. So for 10 years, everybody's house declined. And it was way high. I mean, the average in here in 2009 was $1 million. And we're doing better now. Right as of this year, so far this year, it's 760. So property values are going back up. So I hope in the context, I mean, we went through a dreadful 10-year malaise. And I think that kind of set the tone about spending. I don't know what our spending ought to be. I would mirror it. This club is a great value. Our dues are less than any other place similar configured. And there's some stresses here. And I don't mean to talk out of school, but I know that Ashley and Chief Willie are having grave difficulty hiring people now because they can make more money elsewhere and there's no money. Leon doesn't have any sand in his budget. Leon, the best club manager I've ever seen, and most of us ever seen, that it's like if there's not enough money to hire a greenskeeper, how can Ashley take care of the golf course? And so I'm concerned, you know, I'm very happy that property values have rebounded. No one would have expected this as a result of COVID. But it's happening, and that's a good thing. I mean, I think this community is, the property values in here, based on the data, not my opinion, are up 10, 15% in the last 6 months. That's a good thing. And I don't know what to do. I haven't been on the board to dig through this and understand all this, but we need to take care of our home. Really take care of our home.
I thought I'd get away without answering any questions, but thank you. Reminds me of a story about my dad, who, as long as I knew him, and a very, very stubborn guy, he would never buy an ice cream cone. And he'd buy it for us, although bitching and moaning all the time about it. And I wondered why, and I said, why don't you want to ever buy us an ice cream cone? He goes, well, when I was a kid, they were 2 for a nickel. And he had to spend 50 cents for an ice cream cone for us. It made him crazy. The moral of the story is that, yeah, there is misinformation out there, but it's so helpful for the membership to be educated. And educated as to why sometimes things go up in price. To keep the same amenities that we have, to keep the same roads that we have, to fix the lagoons, so on and so forth. We are like a little town. No one else is going to do it for us. We've got to do it for ourselves, do it on our own. Sometimes we have to spend more. Or maybe it's a matter of spending smarter so we don't have to spend more. What I think would be a great idea, and I'm looking at what we're doing right now, because people always say, how come we don't know more about what's going on? How come we don't have more town halls, so on and so forth? Maybe this is the answer. Do something virtual like this. People can just click on their email, find out what's going on from the board and from the treasurer, from the finance committee. We got a wonderful presentation from Jim Davis that was mentioned beforehand on a Long Cove Club financial overview. That was wonderful. I think was a revelation for all of us, even those of us who've been here for a while. It would be great if that same information can go to the general membership and understand why sometimes things have to be done that maybe you don't want to do in terms of spending, but that have to be done. So let's act smart, but act smart not only in how we spend, but making sure that we keep this place up the way it's supposed to be.
Peggy, you somewhat answered this, but do you have something you want to add?
I do have just a couple of final comments. During my time in school districts, the state required us to maintain a maintenance reserve that was 2% of the value of our fixed assets. That's not an unreasonable number. And I think if we look at the standards among other clubs and our club industry and what they're using and communicate, the reason for that is it keeps you from having the big emergency and needing the big emergency reserve because, you know, the heater in the clubhouse goes out because you didn't maintain it. I think if we can provide people with real facts and figures about why we do this, and I really like the idea of some virtual presentations on just capital reserve. I know that the board has undertaken a reserve study, and I think it would be really good if the membership had access to that kind of information. And just the more, you know, knowledge is power. The more that we know, I think the better it is. But we can't let our capital reserve go too low. You're just asking for the big disaster.
Okay, thanks to each of you. Anybody come up with a question? Oh, here we go.
Wick Bauman, got a question. First of all, I'd like to thank the current board and Leon for the great job that you all have done for the COVID-19 situation. I think everybody in the community appreciates the time and effort you've spent on doing that. My question to the candidates is that we've had a lot of discussion about the operating budget and the capital budget, but you're going to inherit whatever the current board sends out to the membership. I'd like to ask you a question about something that you're going to do early on, once elected, whether you have read the proposed changes to the covenants and bylaws and what your views are on the changes that have been proposed by the governance committee.
Red, I think you're up.
Okay, good. Yes, I have read it. I have to confess it's probably been about 6 months, so I don't have the details fresh in my mind. Changing the bylaws, the covenants, changing the rules and regs is always something you need to do very carefully, very slowly, keeping in mind that those bylaws and rules and regs have been put in place for a reason. Do the bylaws need reviewing on a regular basis? Absolutely they do. Should they be changed on a regular basis? Probably not. If they haven't been changed in a while and you're doing a review, are there going to be some things that need to be changed? The answer is yes. As I was going through the changes, trying to remember from 6 months ago when I read through it, I know one of the things had to do with changing the authorization that the board has to do capital projects. I believe right now it's at $150,000 and the request was to go to $250,000. Trusting the board to go to $250,000 without requiring any kind of referendum. I will tell you that I think $250,000 is a good number. Having seen Nassau Country Club and having compared Nassau Country Club to roughly 30 other clubs in the area up in the Northeast, that number not only is reasonable, it's probably low. But I think going from $150,000 to $250,000 here would be the right thing to do. I think you're electing the board. I think you need to trust the board to spend the money up to at least $250,000 without going to a referendum. As far as the rest of the changes were concerned,
I had breakfast with the man who I believe, if I get this right, Dick, wrote the covenants that we're dealing with now this morning and talked about this. And you know, clearly a document that was 2004, is that right, Dick? 2004? Yeah, so written in 2004 is 2020. Lots of things have happened, and there's appendixes. There's things in there that are dated or not quite accurate and need to be cleaned up. And I'll confess I am not literally detailed knowledge of exactly what those are, but I take it on faith. It's lawyerly language that, Wig, you'd understand better than me. The change to the spending limit is something that I hope we separate these two things out. Because we're going to have to go to the membership and vote on it. And what I would say is there's a whole bunch of housekeeping stuff that really should be done, and you'd understand it better than and Vic would understand it better than non-lawyers. The change in the spending limit, I think, is going to be need special attention and clear explanation to the community. And I'd go get data. What's the spending limit at Colleton River and all their surrounding communities, and say if we're way out of line with what first-rate places like us are doing, then we're making it really hard for the board to do their job, to have to go to a referendum all the time. I don't know if 250 is the right number or 150, but changing it in this community is going to be a challenge, I think.
Briefly, just talking about what Fred did about the amount going from 150 to 250 on the spending. It's interesting that most clubs, when they've had a limit like that in their covenants and bylaws, they usually have a cost of living increase built into it. We did not. Interestingly enough, if you look at what the average in a club is for a spending max before you have to go to a referendum, it's about $400,000. If you take a look at $150,000 back in 1982 and apply cost of living increases to it, the amount in today's dollars is about $400,000. So putting it at 250, I think I agree with what Fred said is reasonable. But moving on to one more thing that hasn't been discussed about governance, which is cumulative voting. And I had talked about in my presentation today about what the fiduciary duty that a board member has to act solely in the interest of the community as a whole. Cumulative voting is something that you'll never find in any municipality, any county, any state. And it's outlawed now in many states for homeowners associations like ourselves. And there's a very good reason why. There's a strong inference when somebody is elected on cumulative voting because of a minority part of the community pushing for that candidate, that candidate, once they get on the board, their obligation is to that small minority and not to the community as a whole. And it's just a direct contradiction to what a fiduciary duty is on behalf of a board member. It just doesn't work, because once you get on the board, your obligation is solely to the interest of the community, period. And that's the reason why cumulative voting has been outlawed in many states. It's why it hasn't worked at so many communities that have had it, and they have moved to get rid of it also. And I think it's really one of the most important parts of the governance changes that we have to look at very, very seriously.
Peggy?
I read the proposed changes, and there's also another part to increasing from 150 to 250, and it says that in 5 years it would be reviewed and could be increased based on the rate of inflation, which I think is an important thing. There seems to be some misconception that if we raised that limit to $250, all of a sudden the board was going to start pulling things out of the air that they could spend $250,000 on. The items that are approved in the capital budget, some of them are over $250,000. But by approving the budget, the community is approving the concept of those ideas. The board will still go to bid. They will not just go spend $250,000. They will spend money on amenities or projects that this community has approved. So I think it's important to give them the tools to make improvements without having to have a referendum once a month to, do a small project. So I'm totally in favor of the increase, and I'm also in favor of tying it to inflation going forward. We need to be able to keep our board and our community able to move forward with projects that the members want.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, I don't have too much to say other than the fact that if I become a board member of Long Cove, I want to make sure that I do what's right for the community in whole, not what's right for any one project or any one interest group. The things that have been set up here all make really good sense. I'm actually not personally all that in favor of increasing it to any large amount. It really gives the board a lot of flexibility to do a lot of big things. That's a lot of money we're talking about, $250,000, $350,000, $400,000. But I don't know enough about it. I've read some of the changes and read some of the things that are up to be changed, and so I have some basic knowledge about it. If the seat happens to come my way, then I certainly will get a lot more intricately involved. I also want to know a little bit about the history, which I don't know, of how we got to, excuse me, where we are today. In order to be able to move forward, got to know how we got to where we are today. So, I just want to make sure that every decision that comes my way, I think of the community and is it best for Long Cove? Is it best for the community itself? Are we going to be better after this, or are we going to go backwards? I want to make sure that we're always stepping forward. Thanks.
We had another question.
Thank you. The question my wife asked was, how do we get our budget passed? And my name is Lance Killorn. And I think that's super important. I mean, we live and die by our budget. So, in the budget that was voted down was $237,000 for a new golf facility, which had not been brought up for a referendum. Do you believe it is good practice for us to be putting things into the budget that the community has had no referendum on? And a simple yes or no works.
Randy, I think you're first.
The board's got to have some discretion. Now, the discretion it has now is items under 150, right? So the board has to have some discretion to make decisions from time to time. But I think on major expenditures, there should be, discussion in the community and a process gone through, if not a referendum, to say, do we want to spend that much money on the golf practice facility?
Yes. No, it wasn't.
I didn't think so.
Clear up, excuse me, do you mind if I?
No, please.
Can you clear that up, Bill?
Well, there was three items. There was three referendumable items that were proposed, that were going to be proposed after the capital budget. They were not included in that budget. The budget, the increase that we were asking for, was for based on the amenities test that we had. We were going to take three things to referendum, but they were not included in the original budget, other than without the increase. They were not. So, but let's go ahead. Anything else?
I think I said it. I don't.
Okay, sorry.
It has to. The board needs discretion, and you can't manage the club without trusting the board. Honestly,
Roads and lagoons, the teaching center, and lights for the tennis courts were the three items that were going to be over $150,000 that would require a referendum. And just one quick comment. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I will say it because I'm leaving the board here pretty soon. If you don't put money in the budget when we have referendable items, now you have to have an increase, and you have to have people pulling money out of their pocket every week. We have discussed a number of times that if we put it in a budget and it doesn't get approved, then the money doesn't get spent. But if it does go to referendum and it gets approved, then we have the money already available, as opposed to going back to you every time and saying, okay, now you got to give us another $50 a month, or next time you got to give you another $100 a month. So it's all your accounting procedure. How you want to do it? How do you want to protect the membership? What do you think's in best? We're not asking. Well, I won't go any further. Vic, your turn.
Well, I want to thank the good Dr. Navarre for clearing that up because I thought my mind had completely lost total focus in terms of what had happened and total memory. I don't know if that makes the question moot now or not, but
it's a good question. I mean, it's still a legitimate question.
but in terms of what the membership should consider when they're voting on the capital expenditure, if it's over 150,000 and it hasn't been brought up to a referendum, then it doesn't belong there. If it's under 150,000 and it's part of the discussion for the capital expenditures, then you make a decision based on whether you want it or not.
I think from Lance's stand, it's a philosophy position. Do you put money in the budget for referendable items that are coming out next year, or do you wait till you do the referendum and then you go back to the membership for increases during the year? I think that's kind of the question he's asking. I apologize, but I think that's what he's asking for your benefit. I mean, for your interpretation of what you think is best going forward. Is that right, Lance? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to speak for you.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah. No.
If we vote on whether we want to do something first, and then we put it into the budget versus vice versa. Oh, let's put it into the budget so that the money, quote, is there in case it's approved.
It's a funding issue. Exactly. So, okay.
Very straightforward. Which do you prefer?
Yeah, so that's the question. I hope you, without my interruption, I hope you understand the question.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the Long Range Planning Committee spends time discussing long-range plans for the community. And was it out of the Long Range Planning Committee where the golf teaching center renovation came, or did it come out of Golf and Greens?
That came out of Golf and Greens.
So it's not like this is an idea that just 9 members pulled out of the air. There's been community discussion. People want to see this as a viable project that will be voted on because it's at 150 or more than 150. I agree that you can't keep going back every single time you want to do something and saying, okay, you approved this, this is $50. A week later, month later, 6 months later, you approve something else. I think you need to have it out there for people to be aware that this is something that will come up for referendum. It's not like you're spending the money someplace else. And if it's in a referendum and it's not approved, it acts as a reserve, which we don't have much reserve in our capital budget. Just my opinion.
Okay.
I would rather have the money then vote on it rather than vote on it and then wonder how we're going to get the money. How the board works is obviously we've heard 2 different philosophies, so I don't know the details of how the board does it now or how they've done it in the past. But I would much more be much happier if I knew that the money was there and then it was up to a vote rather than let's vote to do it and then we'll figure out later how we come up with the money because that could cause some problems. So That's it.
Fred?
I kind of agree with that. You get the input from the Long Range Planning Committee. They've presumably gotten the input from the membership. If the Long Range Planning Committee is recommending the potential of some capital projects, then go ahead and put it in the budget. And I think it was said earlier, if the referendum then does not get approved, then you don't spend the money.
Any other questions? Well, I have a question that was sent in to us. I'll try to read it. And Vic, I think you're the first one back online here.
Okay.
It's not a budget question, by the way. It says, what is your style? And it's a 2-part question. What is your style and how do you run a committee? And second, once you have had an action item, how will you move it forward to implement the proposal?
Okay. The style is that I would like to hear from everybody on the committee, that I want them to be as open and honest as possible. that I would like them to be able to not go into anything with preconceived notions, to listen to everyone else also, to come to a consensus. I've been fortunate being on the Long Range Planning Committee for the last 3 years, and Dr. Snyder has been the chair this year, and we've had some great chairs and co-chairs in the past. And it's been a great experience because they've done that very thing that I mentioned, is that everybody feels very comfortable about talking and trying to hash things out. There's no hidden agendas at all, and they try to come to a general consensus that they can then bring to the board, which I think is the way it has to be done. Second question again is?
Once you have an action item, how will you move it forward to implement the proposal?
So I take it that you mean if I have an item from the committee to bring it to the board? I think what I would do is that I would spend time educating the individual members of the board beforehand, so they understand exactly the reasons why that action item is being brought up, the reasons why that the committee decided that it was important to bring it up, and once again to get their input and to see if we can come to a consensus with the board to deliver on what the committee itself has spent time proposing.
Okay, thank you. Peggy?
I like to see committees work together with everyone having an equal voice. The people who volunteer for any committee come with a wealth of experience and knowledge, and for the most part volunteer for committees that they have experience with. Once the committee makes a recommendation and comes up with a plan, I disagree with Victor in that I would like to bring it to the full board, provide a written presentation prior to a board meeting, a summary of the committee's findings, and with a statement of what the committee would like the board to consider. And moving forward, what the committee feels strongly would be something important to do.
Jeff?
The challenge will be, I mean, it's very similar to running a business. The challenge is going to be to keep the personal agendas out of the picture. So if you have a board or a committee of 5, 6, 7 people, making sure, I think, again, I've mentioned it before, and it's the way I run my business as well, is what is this going to look like as we implement, during the middle of it, and what it's going to look like at the end. And is it going to make our business better? And in this situation, what does it look like how we get started? What's it going to look like during the process? And then at the end of it, what is our ultimate goal? Is it going to make the community better? Whether it's the golf course, the boat dock, whether it's the tennis courts, whether it's the bocce, whether it's open field, whether it's flowers, whether it's clubhouse. What's it today, where we want to be when we get done, and we're going to have that consensus. We also have to understand that the committee is going to have a chairman. And that means that, there's only to some extent you're going to have equal vote. The chairman's in charge. So the chairman's going to have to take charge of their committee and make sure that that consensus gets through all the way to the board, meaning that this is where we're at today, this is how we're going to implement this, and this is our vision for what it's going to look like when we get done with it. And hopefully with that end piece, it's going to be, this is how it's going to make our community better.
Okay. Fred?
So if you've seen my video, I started off with a story. And the story, I won't repeat the story here, but take a look. What's my style? Basically gather as much information and talk to as many people as you can. Make sure you're making the right decision. Then once you make that decision, run like heck to make it happen. I've done that in business, I've done that on boards. How do you make it happen? You get the experts in place to make it happen. You find the right people, whether they're other members, whether they're outside agencies, whether it's existing folks that have some expertise. You need to sell it, you need to market it, and most importantly, you need to execute it.
We're all the products of whatever experience we bring to the table. In my case, and the people that know me well in this room have seen me do it repeatedly, I'm going to go try and find some data, some empirical data that's related to the question, and put that down in some unbiased way and work within the committee to understand it. And if the waterfront group is asking for something, I'm likely to do a poll, a quick, email, here's what's on the table, what do you folks think? So I have data from them. How unified are they? So I understand some data, external data that gives us context and what this group thinks. And then it becomes really critical, and sometimes these are complicated things. And I cite the evidence you've seen from the real estate work I did. It took me 1/10 of the time to get to the conclusion, to look at the numbers and go, wow, I see a pattern in here. I see something, I think I know what's going on here. But I'm going to present that to the board or the community, and I've got to put it in really careful terms that will be understood by non-statisticians, by people with different backgrounds in ways that people can understand. That's almost more important than the data and the analysis. It's being able to make the numbers talk and everybody understand them. And you've seen me do that. Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple of more questions here while everybody else is thinking of their questions. Since March 2020, we have all been affected by the COVID. Many of us learned how to use Zoom, FaceTime, GoToMeetings, and other virtual sites to keep in touch with work, family, and friends. What is your opinion about Long Cove Club introducing virtual meetings for all board and committee meetings to enable our members to safely attend and exercise members' rights to attend these meetings? And I think, Peggy, you're first.
In the present environment, I think it's a great idea. I think any public meeting that we're having, we should try to make it available on Zoom. After the crisis has passed, I believe that we do much better in in-person meetings. It's hard to get a flavor for people's real opinions, and the work that needs to be done is harder on Zoom. But for the near future, I think the more open we can be and the more information that our community members can access, the better. And if that has to be by Zoom right now, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I agree totally with it, whether it be today or in the future. If it's viable and doable within finances, I think it's a great way to be able to allow the membership to at least view or become or feel a part of some of the meetings. Obviously not for comment on most of them, that will lead to some real problems, but certainly to be a part of or listen to the actual ongoings and the actual duties that the board and the committees are a part of. I think it'll do nothing but help.
Okay. Fred?
Being a technology guy, you would think this answer would be easy for me. I like using technology, obviously. I think Zoom is a very useful tool. I think it has its limits. I think you can get a handful of people on Zoom. Once you reach 8, 9, 10 people, the interaction stops. You can't get real feedback. I think real in-person meetings go a long way towards accomplishing some consensus and moving forward on whatever the issue is. Having said that, in this environment, which I think is what the question was, absolutely, go with the technology, use it, let people be virtual, let them look in. If we can, as we're doing today, let them try and pose questions over the internet. Just the 10-minute delay at the beginning of this was indicative of why I'm saying, as a tech guy, I think it's a great idea, but it doesn't always work.
I agree with Fred. There's nothing better than an in-person meeting. I've been in hundreds of them, and you do a presentation in front of a client and the CMO flinches, you stop and say, did I get that? What happened there? Having said that, for the last 8 months, my firm has done all their business by Zoom, and I participate in some of the board meetings and some of the discussions and things that are going on. And it's remarkable how people have adapted to it, not perfectly, not as good as in person, but it's a really good tool, And if I'm on the board and I have a committee and somebody can't be here, putting it up on Zoom so they are part of this makes it way better than trying to make sure everybody can be physically in the same location. It's a really powerful tool.
I agree that you can't beat having folks there in person. It's wonderful having people here. I think for many of us, maybe for all of us, when we did our video and we just were looking into a camera, it's a whole lot different than it is looking into people's faces and hearing feedback that is immediate. But having said that, I think it's still a good idea to consider a hybrid as we go post-pandemic. And I'll tell you why. Because if you look at how many folks live off-site, we have about 570 home sites here. Almost 200 of the 500 are folks who give their domicile as not in Long Cove, but being outside of Long Cove. And I think it'd be great for those folks to know more what goes on within Long Cove, to feel like they're members, because they're equal members to everybody that lives here on a full-time basis. And it will give them an opportunity to become more involved and to have more of an idea of what goes on in this club. So I would be very much in favor, if it works out, to have a hybrid, to have people attend, but also have it available for people off-site.
Okay. We started with you, didn't we, Peg? We started with you, right?
Yes, you started with me.
I'm losing my position. I'm sorry. So I have one other call-in question. What is your position on the leisure path? And Jeff, we'll start with you.
My wife loves it because she walks the dog, and she's around. I'm kind of in the middle of it, to be totally honest. I need to see more information about it. My little street is a nice little street. I live on Rice Mill, but we do have a fair number of walks with my kids and with my dog that take us out onto Long Cove. And if any of you have walked over in front of where Bob Curry lives, over in that little lagoon, that is the Long Cove speed trap that where no one gets caught. My daughter is out there, wants to send the license plates over to the security people of the people that go 40 to 50 miles an hour, a little bit down from your house.
Yes.
So, there are certain areas of this community that leisure paths would really be safe. But then again, if I lived in one of those areas that it would encroach on my land, I'd have to be thinking again. So I really don't know enough about how the details of where and how it is. But in general, I would want to research it because I think it's a safety item. I don't know how long the contracting is going to go on. That's another big thing. As our lots get built out, the contractors will be in here less and less, and that is a big bone of contention as far as traffic in here. The regular members, for the most part, take good care of the speed and the speed limit, and we're not kind of in fear of them. But the trucks with trailers, those guys are a little bit nuts. So,
Okay.
kind of in the middle still.
Okay. Fred?
I think safety and security are paramount to living here. This is clearly a safety issue. I would personally like to see the leisure path moved up on the priority list.
Over 20 years, I don't remember when I first heard about the leisure path, the idea that we would do something with the leisure path. 70 board members on different boards over that period of time studied it and looked at it, and we haven't been able to crack the nut. And I'm sure that people worked really hard trying to figure out how to do this. I don't completely understand why why we can't move forward with it, but thus far the community has not really demanded it. It is a safety issue. I certainly think I think leisure path, and I think about the hiking I did in my life when you go out on some loop, you hike around an area, and I don't see how that's practical here. But there's areas here that we desperately need some help. The entrance and exit here, if you're walking or on your bike, that's a bottleneck, and that's just flat danger. That's really dangerous. So I need to understand more about what's been done, and there's people here who have been working on this for years. But if it was simple, I think we'd have solved it by now. And it's just way more complicated than is obvious at a glance.
I think when we talk about the leisure path, we're really discussing the part of Long Cove Drive that goes from the farm around and then to the 8th green, 9th tee area, because that's the real dangerous part of Long Cove Drive that we've had one near miss after another over certainly all the years that I've been here. In fact, we had one hit where somebody was injured when they were hit by a vehicle. So I'm not sure what we're waiting for. Are we waiting for somebody to be really seriously injured, to be, God forbid, killed? I mean, we know there's a problem there, and it's unfortunate that the paths were not put in initially back in 1981 when the club was built. You know, it possibly was that the folks who built it originally didn't realize it was going to be such a problem in that area, but it is. And I think we have a very strong obligation to do what we can to make sure that our community is safe, period.
Peggy?
As I stated in both my video and my position paper, I'm 100% in favor of a leisure path. It is so dangerous and really frightening sometimes to be not just walking, but to be in your car, because there are blind curves and you can hit a point where one car is going around somebody on one side and you have to go around on the other. There is a phase of the walking trail that does not encroach on anyone's property, and I think that we should start with that and get people off lower part of Long Cove Drive. And I think once that's completed and people feel that sense of relief that they can get out and walk, I think there'll be more of an appetite in the club to move forward and do the second half. But I am strongly in favor of it. I think we shouldn't wait another minute.
Okay. Question. Oh. Questions? Patrick?
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you all. I'm Patrick Carr, and I have two questions. One of the things that is incorporated into our governance documents is this obligation of our board to create demand for member property, thereby enhancing its value. I'm curious to know amongst all the candidates if you have any specific ideas or plans as to what we might do better or different in the future to meet that obligation. And the second question is for everybody but Vic, because he's already commented on it. Do you support the governance committee's recommendation to eliminate cumulative voting, yes or no, and why?
The work I did on a real estate thing suggested that in 2015 or 16, we hired Lindsay and then Christie. Prior to that, when I started to look here, my realtor says, I'm not sure I can get you on the golf course, Randy. They're not really welcoming about that. What's happened since then is our share of sales has gone up. As we hired salespeople who greet potential buyers and real estate agents and so forth, it's worked. And I think doing more of that's a good idea. And doing everything we can to schmooze the realtors. The people I work with in real estate tell me virtually everybody that they sold a big house to down here was here on vacation and said, hey, I want to look at some property. That's the filter through which people come. And I think cumulative voting is just a bad idea. It's not democratic. I'm so proud of the fact that Dennis put 5 candidates up here. It's an election. It's actually an actual election. And I think cumulative voting is a bad thing, and I'm not going to do it this year. It's not because I don't think I'm a good candidate. It's because I have an obligation, I think, to vote for 3 people. That's me.
Other comments in response to Patrick's question?
The value here equals dues. The value is that we have wonderful amenities, wonderful golf, wonderful extras, and our dues are very, very competitive. If we lose track of that, our value will go down very quickly. Just look around. Look at some of the houses and what they're selling for in other communities that have dues that are $6,000 more a year than ours plus. They're not as they're not as good as ours here. Our home values are at where they're at. The demand for property in Long Cove is where it's at because our value is very, very strong. And that comes from security, amenities, golf course, and all the things that we're here talking about tonight. But I really think that the key there is to keep our dues in check and in proper perspective. Certainly being competitive against the others. That's when people come here, what community do you want to live in? They look at the 5, on or off the island. That's what I did, just a normal perspective person, that we're looking at it. So cumulative vote, I would say no.
I think we have an obligation to maintain our facilities, maintain our grounds, keep our lagoons in the best order we could have. We need to fund our capital projects. I think, as I said, I think a leisure path would go a long way toward bringing people into the community and feeling good about that. But bottom line is, we just need to really take care of what we have and make sure that we're doing the best we can to maintain this is a beautiful place. We need to keep it beautiful. As far as cumulative voting, I don't agree with that. There's probably 5 people in the community who still think that's okay, and I'm not one of them. I think it's time. It's outlived its usefulness.
Fred? Oh.
I 100% agree with what Peggy just said. I think maintaining the existing amenities is key. I think you take a look at the member survey and you look what the members want, particularly the new members. Maybe we run another survey to take a page from your book. Just go out there and do a poll. What are the new members? Why do they come here? They came here for the existing amenities. What else do they want? What would help sell additional houses? What would increase the value of the house? So you do that as well. I think as far as the voting is concerned, it's a mistake. I'm totally against it.
I'll go back to I obviously, as has been mentioned, I've already discussed cumulative voting. So let me skip to the other question. Going to our vision and mission statement again, where it talks about an unwavering commitment to excellence, attention to detail, and continuous improvement. If we don't keep the house in order, we've got problems. And we've got to do everything we can do to make sure that we keep everything in tip-top shape. We keep the amenities here that people want, and we keep them in great shape. And if it means somewhere down the road that people want new amenities to keep up with other communities that are putting in certain amenities that are in demand, we have to look at it. It also means, reading from this statement again, implementing and adhering to sound financial management and governance principles, all of which are grounded in integrity. So if you're looking at the question of dues, you still have to make sure that we get total value for our money. But what comes first and foremost is making sure that we keep that attention to excellence and that attention to detail. That is very, very important to make sure we do that in order to keep the value of our properties up as much as possible.
Okay. Thank you all. Very good responses. I have a couple of new questions. Here's a simple one. It says, how well do you know the membership and how many committees have you served on? Maybe those are simple answers. Maybe not.
I have not served on a committee. For the first 15 years, I didn't have the time to do it, and I just got here 3 years ago. I went through the roster. I know about 100 members here.
Dick, we'll just go.
I have been on the long-range planning committee for the last 3 years, and for the past just a few months, I was acting as a liaison from the long-range planning committee to the Golf and Greens committee.
Peggy?
I served for 3 years on the Community Services Committee of the board. I'm the representative for the 9-Hole Ladies Golf Association. In 2018, I was a docent for the house tour. In 2020, I was on the tour committee. We've been involved I was chair of the biking group. I think I probably know 200 to 250 people as a result of my participating in those clubs and activities.
Okay. Jeff?
Well, what happened? Well, I was told when I tried to get on a committee that I had to be here for 3 years. And so I've been trying to get on committees, and this was luckily enough, this was the first year that someone said, oh, okay, we don't know what that rule was. So yeah, I mean, I'm willing to serve. I think one of the big keys for me and my family is how we give back for what's been given to us. And so we really do feel so honored and blessed to be a part of our community. This is my first actual acceptance of being on a committee. I love serving. I love being on the different committees. I've been fortunate to know probably quite a few members. I mean, I'm probably up to 75 to 100 through some business associations and also through just playing golf. We enjoy getting out there. We enjoy going to the range. If you haven't been to the range recently, it's a very good social event. So we try to get to the range with the family as often as we can to kind of socialize. So thank you.
Okay, Fred?
Let's see, I'm currently on the MGA committee. I'm currently on the House committee. Where I've gotten to know most of the members is being a co-chair of the Tuesday Golf Group, which is kind of like trying to herd cats. We've got 82 names in that list, and trying to get 8, 9, 10 tee times a week is not an easy thing. That's another issue, though. So how many members do I know? Probably upwards of 120, 130, something like that.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? I have one other here, but I want to give you everybody opportunity. Lance? Oh, we got it. Microphone's on its way.
Life experience always suggests that truth lies between extremes. I endorse the notion that we should raise the spending limit that's been proposed in the draft governance. I believe it handcuffs the board from doing their responsibility to maintain this community the way we expect and hope. I'm very pro on that. Whether the number is 250, 400, that is something the board will investigate and propose. Great. I think the issue is different for aspirational items and new and expansion of facilities. I like the notion of that threshold being a separate threshold of 150 or whatever the number, that's the current number, because it allows the community as a whole to voice through their vote on the referendum whether they want this new facility, this new amenity, this new thing, because it's not always about the initial cost. If you build a new facility, you have to insure it. If you build it, you have to maintain it. And then it's no longer a capital issue, it's a capital maintenance issue.
Excuse me, Lance, do you have a question?
Well, the point is, do you, if you want, very simply, raise your hand, do you support bifurcating, raising the threshold that for maintenance and maintenance and the like, that the threshold be raised, and that possibly for new amenities, we leave it right where it's at? Simple question.
What are we raising? Okay.
Could you give an example of what an aspirational project might be so we could be a little more clear about what you mean?
The paths, the golf teaching facility, a fitness center, those are non-existing things. So those are, in the chairman's words, he invented the notion, I think, of aspirational. I saw it in one of your speeches, so I'm using it just so that we speak in the terms the board understands.
The leisure path is not new. The leisure path has been in the strategic plan since the strategic plan was developed. The same thing with the fitness center. Both of those items would far exceed $250,000. I'm not sure that I understand that example as being aspirational. If we wanted to go out and build a statue of Jim Faree and have celebrations around it And that just came up out of the air. To me, that would be what you're talking about, an aspirational item. I'm sorry, maybe that's not a very good example.
That was great. I love it.
But I don't think I understand where you're coming from, and
Bill?
maybe some of the other people do.
Bill, you invented the term aspirational. Would you help her?
Well, it's a totally new amenity. I mean, a fitness center would be an aspirational amenity because it doesn't exist now. We're not improving it. And a controversy has been about the teaching center. We're going to enhance the teaching center we have. We didn't call it aspirational. Some other people said it was aspirational because it's brand new. It's not brand new. It's taking an amenity that you have and trying to improve it to make it more useful to the membership.
But if
that
I may, these aren't ideas that the board is making up. This is
No.
all coming from the membership survey, from the long-range planning committee,
Yeah.
from all the members that feed into the long-range planning committee, to the chairman of the long-range planning committee, to the board. How is that aspirational? It's something that the membership is asking for. Whether or not it gets approved, you find out when you do the referendum.
When you do the referendum, right. But
I have a comment. I'm not going to answer perfectly your question, but I do want to make one point. The roads in our community are awful. They're in front of your house, in Eloise's house, the road's awful. I was down there this morning, and the landscaping that everybody does on our street is gorgeous. And right in front of your house is a cul-de-sac that Shipyard would be embarrassed to have. Seriously.
Shipwreck.
And the roads in common areas, I don't know what I know there's plans about what to do that stretch out into the future. I'm 73. At some point, I'd like to go on to Strawberry Hill and see a nice road that goes up there to the main highway. I told somebody it's like when I was a kid and lived on a dirt road and had to ride my bike to the main highway, to get to a good road, a better road. So the push and tug on money between new things, whether they're aspirational or that we don't, new amenities, and taking care of our homes, I wish we'd take better care of our homes.
any other comments?
Surrounding stuff, right?
Any other comments from any of the other candidates? Okay, I have one other question, and this is a kind of a yes or no answer maybe, but if you want to expand, you can. What is your position on a fitness center? We've already talked about the walking path, so
Who's up?
I mean, I don't know that you have a bad thing. I don't think you have enough information what would ever be proposed, but
I'm not
the
exactly
concept.
sure what a fitness center would be. I can tell you that we tried a fitness center up at the club in New York. Didn't fly at all. And here's one of the main reasons why. Most folks that want a fitness center already belong to a gym. How are you going to compete? You build a fitness center here, how are you going to compete with a $10 a month gym? It doesn't work. It would cost a lot more than $10 a month increase in capital to build it, to maintain it, to get the staff, to get the coaches. We tried it over a period of 4 or 5 years. It never worked.
okay. Anybody else?
I think there's a lot of other things before the fitness center. It'll be worth discussing for some future plans. I'm not totally against it, but there's a number of other items that, that we could talk about as far as what's existing that we need to work on. And then we can have discussions about how the capital, expenditures gets paid 2, 3, 4, 5 years out in the future. So,
Okay.
as of today, no.
Yeah, Peggy?
I agree. I don't see it as a priority. I think probably we learned something with what's happened to fitness centers during COVID. When people don't come because they can't and you don't have those dues, you're stuck with a huge financial liability. It's also a big insurance liability. And I just don't see the great demand for it other than people saying, well, this community has it and that community has it. We have fine fitness centers on Hilton Head that are not far from home. And I agree, we cannot compete with Planet Fitness. And I think there's so many other things that would enhance the livability in this community that are far more important than us investing in a fitness center.
The data on home sales, and I know that Christie is asked, where's your fitness center by every buyer, right? the evidence is it doesn't stop them from buying when she says we have 7 of them within 2 miles of the front gate, and you can choose the exact right one for yourself.
Right.
It's commented on reasonably enough, but the evidence in home sales is it's certainly, I mean, would we have sold more homes? There's only 4 left. I don't know. So it seems right now, I would maybe down the road, you know, at some point, but it's not hurting us right now not to have one. Not really.
Dick, you have a comment?
I mentioned in my presentation that I had been involved in researching fitness centers for the past 3 years for the Long Range Planning Committee. And I mentioned the pros and cons. And there are pros and there are cons. But I think it needs to be brought up for a discussion with the community, because there's a lot of folks that have moved here in the past 3-4 years that are looking for a fitness center. There are folks that have been here for a lot longer that don't care about a fitness center. One thing that you do have to look at is that when you talk about fitness centers being on the island and outside of our gate, one thing that I've always tried to tell everybody from my experience as a commercial attorney is that you never know when a business is going to go out of business, or you never know when a business is going to be evicted. We've just seen that with one of the most popular gyms on the island close by, which is closing down or may have closed down already, and was a popular fitness center with the folks here at Long Cove. So it's something that I think deserves discussion. It should not be dismissed out of hand. And it's ultimately up to the community to decide if they want to have it or not. And I think I'm fine with that. I think everybody should be fine with that. But it's a discussion that needs to be had.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? We have time for one more, I think. Okay. Thank you, candidates.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. And thanks to everyone who was here and also those who are streaming in. So we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Can I keep the microphone?